Before we get to the actual video, I just want to do a quick follow-up to my last video, because I've certainly angered a lot of people from a certain big nation in Asia, and they're just toxic and terrible. Yeah, it's China, okay, we're talking about China. They got angry, alright? They're not. Ah, good. They're gone. Okay, now let's begin.
And that is whether or not Pakistan downed an Indian jet, or in fact more than that. Can you confirm?
What is important is that not the jet being down, but why they were being down.
But a jet,
Why? Why they were.
Because you were mounting outdated Mica air-to-air missiles onto this expensive jet without any proper AWACS support.
So the good part is that we are able to understand the tactical mistake which we made.
The mistake was to use the Rafale in the first place.
What is important is why they were down. That is more important for us. And what did we do after that?
And after that, you sent delegations across the world claiming victory, each one with 150 pages of documents as proof. Also, they claim that they've destroyed some X-16 Block 52D fighter jets. And I guess that's the exact reason why they did not get approved to enter the White House. So their US envoy had to do a speech in the public area at the 9/11 Memorial in New York. Alright, now let's talk about the topic of this video, which will be an analysis of both India and Pakistani's air defense systems, what did they do, and the damage they have suffered. So after the air engagement on May 7th, both India and Pakistan had launched strikes against one another, mostly with ground-based systems such as rocket artillery, drones, cruise missiles, and in Pakistani's case, air-launched ballistic weapons. And let's talk about the Indian strike on Pakistan first. Now what you're seeing is a BrahMos missile hit on a Pakistani aircraft hangar. The damage here is really obvious, and judging by the size of the hole, I think it's no doubt a BrahMos. Also, there's a satellite imagery of the destroyed Pakistani radar. The before and after image should be reversed. There's a mistake. Where to understand what was going on, you have to switch the word before and after on this image. And you can clearly see that there's a big crater on where the radar was. There are many images like this that shows damaged infrastructure on the Pakistani side. However, on the Indian news press, there are also satellite images which they claim are destroyed radar side, but the before and after image looks no different. I don't know if it was a hit with weapons such as drone with a very small explosive warhead that did limited damage, or it may have been just a miss, but somehow the satellite image got into the news press, claiming it as a hit. But regardless of those questionable satellite images, it's still rather clear that India had successfully struck a dozen of military targets, maybe more, in Pakistan. And from these examples, we can see that the BrahMos missile system works really well, especially against fixed ground target. The BrahMos missile is a rather advanced cruise missile. Compared to the famous Tomahawk, this one can travel at supersonic speed, to be specific at Mach 3, therefore making it rather hard to intercept. Also, it is a cruise missile, which means that it flies relatively low to the ground. So it is also really hard to detect. And I believe there's an anti-ship capability within the BrahMos, although we did not see that during this conflict. There are at least one BrahMos missile which did not make it to the target. As you can see here, this is a detached inner ramjet part of the BrahMos missile. And there are other bits and pieces here and there. Now we don't know if they were intercepted by the Pakistani side, nor do we know if they have just malfunctioned and fell out of the sky. But what we do know is that those missiles have not detonated correctly, because if they have done so, then just by the sheer explosive mass, you will not see those parts laying around. It will be blown up into ashes. However, what Pakistanis clearly intercepted was those little drones, mostly suicide attack drones from the Indian side. Aside from the BrahMos cruise missile, these drones played a major part of India's retaliatory strike against Pakistan after May 7th. Pakistanis claim that they have downed 70 to 80 of them. There are many images on the internet that can support the claim, although I personally cannot track if there are actually 70 to 80 drones downed based on the images on the internet. But from what I can say is that there are substantial amount of Indian drones that got shot down. However, the nature of drones in modern warfare is not that they are hard to intercept, but they're cheap and they come in swarms. Therefore, many of the Indian drones got through the Pakistani air defenses and actually struck. However, the most noteworthy strike was on an HQ-16's command vehicle. Well, how do I know it's a drone strike? Well, firstly, because there's no crater on the ground, so we know that it's not something like an artillery shell. And the structure of the target is mostly still intact, so it's nothing like a BrahMos. If it's a BrahMos, you will not see like the back part of the vehicle. You'll see four wheels lying around in the field with a huge crater. After May 7th air battle, India's retaliatory strike on Pakistan was mostly successful. The Pakistani air defense system did its job, however, it's still proven to be insufficient against modern drone warfare tactics and low-flying supersonic cruise missiles. However, the systems such as the Crotel, the HQ-16, and the HQ-9 did intercept countless drones and even possibly a BrahMos missile. Now let's talk about Pakistani's retaliatory strike on India after May 7th. Now, regarding the smaller weapon platforms such as drones and rocket artillery, I cannot find any pictures online that shows Pakistani's munition landing in India hitting something, because those munitions have really small explosive warhead, which means that it's really hard to see from the satellite. Because, well, after the Rafale incident, I think they're taking phones away from people, especially those who live close to Kashmir. Well, not literally taking the phones away, but you get the idea. However, I do believe, like the Indian strikes on Pakistan, many of the Pakistani munitions did got intercepted by India. However, also a significant number of those did make it through. The most noteworthy claim was the destruction of an S-400 system with the usage of CM-400 AKG, air-to-ground weapon system. So let's quickly go through these weapon systems. The CM-400 AKG is an air-launched hypersonic missile that has a really high cruise altitude and capable of doing evasive maneuvers and reaching a terminal speed of Mach 5. So basically, at the terminal phase, when it hit the target, it will still be traveling at speed of Mach 5, which is the bottom line of hypersonic weapons. The S-400 air defense system, on the other hand, is a complex air defense system. It has multiple sets of control vehicles, radars, and launchers. And it does not only contain one type of missile. Instead, it contains many. So the 40N6 is the big missile with 400 kilometers of range that sits in the center, surrounded by 48 N6s, which are the 250 kilometers of range medium-sized interceptor. And those are surrounded by missiles with shorter ranges. So let's make things simpler. This is a THAAD, long-range SAM system, used to intercept ballistic missiles at long range. And it's surrounded by 3 Patriot missiles for intercepting air targets at somewhat long range. And if you zoom in on each Patriot, you'll see that it's surrounded by NASAM systems, so that targets such as helicopters and cruise missiles that just popped out of the terrain can be engaged more efficiently with those cheaper missiles. The S-400 is something like that, which has missiles to engage targets from 40 to 400 kilometers. And all these radars, command vehicles, and launch vehicles are deployed across a really large area, which means that even if one of the vehicle got hit, it's really hard to say if the entire system got destroyed or not. Now let's look at the satellite images provided by the Pakistanis. From the first set of images, I cannot tell anything. It seems to be of a really low definition, and I cannot really identify anything resemblance of an S-400. If you can see anything, let me know. Now the second set of images provided did show something. Let me zoom in. So you might be asking, is that a crater beside the S-400? Well, from the first glance, it does look like a crater. However, from the before images provided by Pakistan, we can see that the circular structure had always been there. So with a closer look, I think what's being hit are those buildings over there. So please pay attention to the outline of the building, right? This is the after image, and this is the before image. Note that you can see like a rectangular area, which I assume is like a basketball yard or something, basketball court. The outline was pretty clear. And in the after image, you can see that it's being filled with what looks like debris. Now the question is whether or not those 4 vehicles parked there are part of an S-400 system. I'd say that is highly likely because that is the only air defense system in India that requires more than 3 vehicles parked together, like 1 radar, 1 command vehicle, and 2 launchers. So from what I can see is that the CM400 have missed their target by about 100 meters, hitting a dormitory, I believe. How exactly this happened, I have no idea, but I do speculate the following. So the Pakistani HQ-17 tried to locate the S-400 by triangulation. It flies perpendicularly to the S-400's radar and basically collects the direction of the radar signal every few seconds. And every time it collects the direction of the signal, it converts the signal into lines on the map. And by joining up 2 or more lines, it will estimate where the S-400 radar is. And finally, put in the estimated coordinates into the missile and let the missile take out the target. And due to the error of estimation, it seems to have missed the S-400 site by about 100 meters. What I have said there was speculation. The fact is that something in India got hit. It did not hit the S-400, but the S-400 also did not intercept it. So let's end our video right here with a conclusion that the Pakistani Air Force did score an air-to-air victory against India. Later on, we saw that India did hold an advantage against Pakistan in terms of cruise missiles and long-range strike capabilities. And Pakistan also showed that they do also have something which can break through India's air defense, although failing to hit the target, it was pretty close. Now let's put a brief end to this topic of the India and Pakistani conflict that's been going on in the past month. And if you still like to see something related, you can visit this year's Paris Air Show. You can see both the Rafale and the J-10C. And let me make a prediction, okay? You'll see an angry Dassault representative arguing with tourists that it's all pilot's fault, that it got shot down, and yeah, that's my prediction. Also, I'll not be visiting, because France is having another revolution, and it's likely for you to get guillotined if you go, so don't go. Unless you have cakes, of course, because those revolutionaries, when they are out of bread, they really want cakes. So if you show them cake, they'll not kill you.